Sandra had always dreamed of finding the perfect home. After years of living out of suitcases and moving from one temporary place to another, she was ready for something stable, something that felt like hers. Her career in Hollywood had given her fame and success, but it hadn't given her the peace of having a space where she could truly relax. So, on a bright Saturday morning, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She drove to an upscale neighborhood known for its quiet streets, beautiful houses, and breathtaking views. It was the kind of place where people went to escape the chaos of city life. The house Sandra was visiting that day stood at the end of a winding driveway, surrounded by tall oak trees and lush greenery. Its exterior was painted a soft cream color, with large windows that reflected the sunlight. From the outside, it looked like a dream come true, exactly what Sandra had been hoping to find. She parked her car and stepped out, taking a deep breath of fresh air. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine waking up here every morning, sipping coffee on the porch and enjoying the calmness of nature. But before she could get too lost in her thoughts, Lisa, her real estate agent, appeared. Lisa was dressed in a sharp blazer and high heels, carrying a clipboard and a folder full of papers. She greeted Sandra with a smile that seemed just a little too wide, a little too rehearsed. "Good morning," Lisa said cheerfully. "I'm so glad you could make it. This property is absolutely stunning. I think you'll love it." Sandra nodded politely, trying to match Lisa's enthusiasm. The two women shook hands, and then Lisa led the way toward the front door. Sandra followed, her heart beating faster with anticipation. As they entered the house, Sandra couldn't help but feel impressed. The interior was even more beautiful than she'd expected. High ceilings stretched above them, and natural light poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The living room was spacious with sleek furniture and tasteful decorations. There was a grand staircase leading upstairs, and beyond that, Sandra could see glimpses of a modern kitchen with state-of-the-art appliances. Everything about the house screamed luxury, and for a moment Sandra forgot all about the stress of house hunting. Maybe this was it, the place she'd been searching for. But as Lisa began showing her around, something changed. At first it was subtle, a slight shift in tone, a comment here and there that didn't quite sit right. When they walked into the kitchen, Lisa pointed out the marble countertops and stainless steel appliances, saying, "Of course, someone might not fully appreciate these details unless they have a certain refined taste." Sandra raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She assumed Lisa was just trying to emphasize the quality of the house. But as they moved from room to room, the comments became harder to ignore. In the master bedroom, Lisa remarked, "This space is perfect for someone who values elegance and sophistication. Not everyone understands that, though." Sandra forced a smile, feeling a knot form in her stomach. Was Lisa implying that she wasn't sophisticated enough? In the backyard, which featured a sparkling pool and a gazebo, Lisa added, "It takes a special kind of person to maintain a property like this. You know, someone who has time for such things." Sandra clenched her fist slightly, realizing that Lisa wasn't just talking about the house anymore. She was making assumptions about Sandra, about her lifestyle, her priorities, and even her worth. By the time they reached the dining room, Sandra's patience was wearing thin. Lisa gestured toward the chandelier hanging above the table and said, "This piece is exquisite." Of course, some people might not notice the craftsmanship because they're used to simpler things. That was the final straw. Sandra stopped walking and turned to face Lisa, her expression unreadable. "What do you mean by simpler things?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Lisa hesitated, clearly caught off guard. She stammered, "Oh, nothing specific. I just meant that not everyone appreciates fine art or design." Sandra took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "Are you saying I don't appreciate fine art or design? Or are you referring to my career? Because if you have something to say, I'd rather hear it now." Lisa's face flushed red and she quickly backtracked. No, of course not. I was just making general observations. Please don't take it personally." But Sandra could see right through her. Lisa's words weren't accidental. They were calculated, designed to make Sandra feel small and inadequate. And it worked, for a while. Standing in the middle of that luxurious dining room, Sandra felt a wave of frustration wash over her. She had worked hard for everything she had, overcoming countless challenges to build a successful career. Yet here she was, being judged and dismissed by someone who didn't know her at all. It wasn't fair, and it certainly wasn't professional. But instead of lashing out, Sandra chose to stay composed. She reminded herself that this was business, not personal, or at least, that's what she tried to convince herself. Deep down, though, the sting of Lisa's words lingered, gnawing at her confidence. As the tour continued, Sandra found herself questioning why she hadn't walked away yet. Part of her wanted to leave immediately, to put as much distance between herself and Lisa as possible. But another part of her refused to give up. She had come here looking for a home, and she wasn't going to let anyone ruin that for her, not even someone as unpleasant as Lisa. Still, Sandra couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. No matter how beautiful the house was, it didn't feel right. Something about the atmosphere, or maybe Lisa's attitude, made it impossible for Sandra to picture herself living there. Just when Sandra thought she couldn't take another second of Lisa's passive-aggressive remarks, there was a knock at the door. Both women turned toward the sound, surprised. Lisa frowned, muttering under her breath. Who could that be? Sandra shrugged, equally curious. Without waiting for an invitation, the visitor opened the door and stepped inside. Sandra's jaw dropped when she saw who it was. Standing in the doorway, casually dressed in jeans and a leather jacket, was none other than Keanu Reeves. He held a coffee cup in one hand and smiled warmly, his presence instantly calming the tension in the room. "Hi," Keanu said, his voice soft and friendly. "Sorry to interrupt. I'm looking at properties in the area and noticed your cars outside. Thought I'd stop by and say hello." Sandra blinked, unsure whether she was dreaming or awake. Keanu Reeves, Hollywood legend, action star, and all-around nice guy, was standing in the same house as her. Meanwhile, Lisa froze, her mouth hanging open in shock. Clearly, she hadn't expected this turn of events either. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Lisa snapped out of her daze and practically sprinted toward Keanu, her earlier hostility completely forgotten. "Oh my goodness, Mr. Reeves. What an honor," Lisa gushed, shaking his hand vigorously. "Welcome, please. Come in. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee, a private tour of the property?" Keanu chuckled, clearly amused by her enthusiasm. "Thanks, but I'm good," he replied, glancing around the room. His gaze landed on Sandra, and he grinned. "Hey, I recognize you. Aren't you Sandra Bullock? We met at that charity event last year, right?" Sandra nodded, still processing the surreal situation. "Yes, we did. Small world, huh?" Keanu's arrival marked a turning point in the day's events. Suddenly, Lisa's focus shifted entirely to him, leaving Sandra free to observe from the sidelines. Sandra watched as Lisa fawned over Keanu, praising his movies and complimenting his choice of clothing. It was almost comical how quickly Lisa's demeanor had changed. One minute she was criticizing Sandra, the next she was practically bowing down to Keanu. Sandra couldn't help but laugh quietly to herself. If nothing else, this day had taught her a valuable lesson about human behavior and the absurdity of judging others based on appearances. Keanu's presence in the house was like a sudden gust of fresh air. While Lisa scrambled to impress him, Sandra stood quietly, observing the scene unfold. She couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Keanu carried himself. There was no arrogance in his demeanor, no sense that he thought he was better than anyone else. Instead, he exuded a quiet confidence and kindness that put everyone at ease. Even Lisa, who had been so quick to judge Sandra moments earlier, seemed to soften under his calm gaze. As Lisa continued her over-the-top attempts to charm Keanu, Sandra found herself smiling despite everything. It was hard not to feel amused, watching Lisa trip over her own words, trying to act casual while clearly starstruck. At one point, Lisa even offered to let Keanu skip the line for other properties in the area, promising to prioritize him above all other clients. Keanu politely declined, saying he didn't want to inconvenience anyone. His humility only made Lisa try harder, which only made Sandra laugh more internally. The irony wasn't lost on her. Lisa, who had spent the last hour belittling Sandra, was now bending over backward for someone simply because of their fame. Sandra decided to step in before things got too out of hand. "Keanu," she said, cutting through Lisa's endless chatter. "What brings you to this neighborhood? Are you looking for a place here?" Her tone was friendly but firm, steering the conversation away from Lisa's desperate attempts to win points. Keanu turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Yeah, actually," he replied. "I've been thinking about settling down somewhere quieter. This area seems nice, so I figured I'd check it out." He paused for a moment, then added with a grin, "Plus, it's always good to run into familiar faces." The comment caught Sandra off guard, but in the best way possible. It was such a simple thing to say, yet it carried so much warmth. For the first time that day, Sandra felt seen, not as a celebrity or a client, but as a person. She smiled back, feeling some of the tension from earlier melt away. "Well, I hope you find what you're looking for," she said sincerely. Keanu nodded, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Thanks. And hey, if you don't mind me tagging along, maybe we can take a look around together. Two opinions are better than one, right?" Lisa froze mid-sentence, her mouth open in shock. Clearly, she hadn't anticipated Keanu wanting to join forces with Sandra instead of letting her guide him solo. But Keanu didn't seem to notice or care about Lisa's reaction. He looked at Sandra expectantly, waiting for her response. Sandra hesitated for a split second, unsure if agreeing would make things awkward. Then she realized it didn't matter. If anything, having Keanu around might make the rest of the tour bearable and maybe even fun. "Sure," she said finally, returning his smile. "Why not?" With that, the three of them resumed the tour, though the dynamic had shifted entirely. Lisa led the way, still trying to regain control of the situation. But her earlier confidence was gone. Every time she tried to interject with a comment or question, Keanu gently redirected the conversation back to Sandra. He asked her opinion on the layout of the rooms, whether the lighting suited her taste, and if she thought the backyard was big enough for hosting gatherings. Each question was genuine, showing that he valued her input. Sandra appreciated the effort, especially after the way Lisa had treated her earlier. At one point, they entered a cozy library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a fireplace. Sandra immediately fell in love with the space. "This is my favorite room so far," she admitted, running her fingers along the edge of a shelf. "It feels peaceful, like a place where you could really unwind." Keanu nodded in agreement. "I like it too," he said. "It reminds me of those old libraries you see in movies. You know, the ones where people sit by the fire and read for hours." Sandra laughed softly. "Exactly. Though I doubt I'd spend much time reading. I'd probably end up napping." Her joke earned a chuckle from Keanu, but Lisa looked confused, as if she didn't understand how humor worked. She quickly jumped in, attempting to steer the conversation back to practical matters. "Yes, well, this room does have excellent acoustics," she said stiffly. "Perfect for entertaining guests during formal events." Sandra rolled her eyes inwardly. Formal events? Who cared about that when the room screamed comfort and relaxation? Keanu must have sensed her irritation because he quickly changed the subject. "So Sandra," he began casually, "how's your latest project coming along? I heard you've been working on something exciting." The question caught Sandra off guard, not because it was unusual, but because it showed that Keanu paid attention. Most people only cared about surface-level details, like box office numbers or headlines. But Keanu remembered the small things, like her passion for storytelling and her dedication to her craft. Sandra felt a surge of gratitude as she launched into an explanation of her recent work, sharing anecdotes about the challenges and joys of filming. Lisa listened silently, her face a mixture of confusion and frustration. She clearly didn't know how to insert herself into the conversation anymore. Sandra almost felt sorry for her, but not quite. After all, Lisa had brought this on herself by treating Sandra like she didn't belong. Now, thanks to Keanu, Sandra was reminded of her worth. Fame wasn't everything, but it did give her access to opportunities others didn't have. And in this case, it gave her the chance to connect with someone who truly understood what it meant to navigate life in the spotlight while staying grounded. As the tour progressed, Sandra noticed another shift, not just in Lisa's behavior, but in her own mindset. Before Keanu arrived, she had felt defensive, as if she needed to prove herself to Lisa. But now she didn't feel the need to justify anything. Keanu's presence had created a safe space, one where she could be herself without worrying about judgment. She started speaking more freely, sharing her thoughts and feelings about the house without filtering them. To her surprise, Keanu listened intently, nodding along and offering thoughtful responses. By the time they reached the final room, a sprawling attic converted into a home gym, Sandra realized she wasn't thinking about Lisa at all. Instead, she was focused on the conversation with Keanu, enjoying the easy rapport they shared. They talked about everything from their favorite workout routines to their mutual love of travel. At one point, Keanu mentioned a trip he'd taken to Japan, describing the serene temples and bustling markets with such vivid detail that Sandra felt like she was there. She found herself laughing at his stories, forgetting for a moment that they were standing in a house she didn't even want to buy. When the tour finally ended, Lisa practically sprinted to the front door, eager to wrap things up. She handed Sandra a folder containing information about the property, her voice clipped and professional. "Well, thank you for your time," she said, avoiding eye contact. "If you have any questions, feel free to reach out." Sandra accepted the folder with a polite nod, though she knew she wouldn't be calling Lisa anytime soon. As for Keanu, Lisa barely acknowledged him, too flustered to say more than a quick goodbye before hurrying to her car. Once Lisa was gone, Sandra turned to Keanu, a grin spreading across her face. "You know, I think I owe you a thank you," she said. "That was interesting, to say the least." Keanu shrugged modestly. "No problem. I could tell something was off when I walked in. Figured I'd stick around to make sure everything was okay." Sandra raised an eyebrow, impressed by his perceptiveness. "You're pretty observant for someone who just happened to stop by," she teased. Keanu laughed. "Let's just say I've been in enough uncomfortable situations to recognize the signs." They stood there for a moment, the weight of the day slowly lifting. Sandra glanced back at the house, its grandeur now dulled by the memory of Lisa's rudeness. "You know, I don't think this place is for me," she admitted. "But I'm glad I came today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have run into you." Keanu smiled, his expression warm. "Same here. Maybe next time we'll find a house that suits us both." Sandra chuckled. "Deal." As they parted ways, Sandra felt lighter than she had in weeks. The encounter with Lisa had been unpleasant, yes, but it had also taught her something valuable. Not everyone will respect you, and that's okay. What mattered was how you responded, and sometimes fate sent unexpected blessings your way, like a chance meeting with a kindred spirit. Sandra drove away from the house, already looking forward to the next chapter of her journey. As Sandra drove away from the house, she couldn't stop thinking about Keanu. It wasn't just his fame or charm that stuck with her. It was his kindness. In a world where people often judged others based on appearances or status, Keanu had been refreshingly genuine. He didn't try to impress anyone. He simply showed up and made things better. For Sandra, it was a reminder of how rare and valuable authenticity could be. The next few days passed quickly as Sandra threw herself back into work. She had meetings to attend, scripts to review, and interviews to give. But no matter how busy she got, her mind kept drifting back to that afternoon at the house. She replayed moments in her head, the way Keanu had deflected Lisa's awkwardness, the warmth in his voice when he spoke, and the effortless connection they shared. It wasn't every day you met someone who made you feel so comfortable, especially in an industry as competitive as Hollywood. One evening, after wrapping up a long day of filming, Sandra decided to scroll through her phone. She noticed a text notification from an unfamiliar number. Curious, she opened it and smiled when she saw the message. "Hey Sandra, it's Keanu. Hope this isn't too forward, but I figured we should exchange numbers. Let me know if you ever need a second opinion on houses or anything else. Sandra laughed softly to herself. Of course he would follow up. Keanu wasn't the type to let a good conversation fade without a proper goodbye. She replied right away. Thanks for reaching out, and thanks again for saving me from Lisa's tour of doom. You're officially my favorite co-house hunter. A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with a response. Anytime, Keanu wrote. Though I have to admit, I think you handled yourself pretty well before I showed up. That takes guts. Sandra felt a pang of pride reading his words. It was true. She had stood her ground despite Lisa's snide comments. But having Keanu there had made all the difference. His presence reminded her that she didn't have to face difficult situations alone. Sometimes even a small act of kindness could change the entire tone of a day. Over the next couple of weeks, Sandra and Keanu exchanged messages regularly. Their conversations started with lighthearted topics, favorite movies, travel destinations, and funny stories from set, but soon deepened into more personal territory. Keanu told Sandra about his love for motorcycles and how riding helped him clear his mind. Sandra shared her passion for adopting rescue dogs and how much joy her pets brought her. They discovered they had more in common than they initially thought, from their shared dislike of pretentious behavior to their mutual appreciation for quiet evenings at home. Each message felt like reconnecting with an old friend rather than getting to know someone new. The ease of their communication surprised Sandra, but it also felt natural. After years of navigating superficial relationships in Hollywood, she cherished the simplicity of talking to someone who truly listened. During one of their exchanges, Keanu mentioned he was still looking for a place to buy. I've seen a few houses, but nothing feels quite right yet, he admitted. What about you? Have you found anything since our little adventure? Sandra sighed, typing out her reply. Not really. I've looked at a couple of places, but none of them feel like home. It's frustrating because I know what I want. I just can't seem to find it. Keanu responded almost immediately. Maybe we should team up. 2 heads are better than 1, right? Plus, it'll be fun. Sandra hesitated before replying. On one hand, the idea of house hunting with Keanu sounded appealing. On the other hand, she worried about mixing friendship with real estate, a process that could get complicated fast. But then she remembered how easygoing he was and decided to take the risk. All right, she typed back. Let's do it. But only if you promise not to steal my dream house out from under me. Their first outing together was scheduled for the following weekend. Sandra spent the days leading up to it feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. She hadn't spent much time with Keanu outside of work-related events, and part of her wondered if their chemistry would translate in person, as well as it did over text. When the day finally arrived, she dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, wanting to keep things low-key. As she pulled up to the meeting spot, a cozy cafe near the first property, they agreed to check out. She spotted Keanu waiting outside. He waved when he saw her car, his smile instantly putting her at ease. Morning, he said as she stepped out. Ready to find your dream house? Sandra nodded, returning his grin. Let's hope so. I'm starting to think it doesn't exist. Keanu chuckled. Don't give up yet. We've got a whole list to go through. The first house they visited was charming but impractical. Its narrow hallways and outdated kitchen weren't what either of them had in mind. Still, they enjoyed poking fun at the quirky design choices, like the neon green bathroom tiles and the oddly shaped windows. By the time they left, Sandra's sides hurt from laughing so much. Okay, she said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. That was definitely memorable. Let's never speak of it again. The second house was closer to what Sandra envisioned, a modern build with sleek lines and plenty of natural light. As they walked through the rooms, she found herself imagining how she'd decorate the space. She pointed out features she liked, to Keanu, who nodded thoughtfully. It's nice, he said. But does it feel like you? Sandra paused, considering his question. While the house was beautiful, something about it still felt off. Not really, she admitted. It's missing character. Keanu agreed, adding, sometimes it's not about the house itself, it's about how it makes you feel. If it doesn't click, It's not the right place. Sandra appreciated his insight. Most people would have pushed her to settle, but Keanu encouraged her to trust her instincts. It was another example of why she valued his perspective. By mid-afternoon, they were both hungry and decided to grab lunch at a nearby diner. Sitting across from each other in a booth, they ordered burgers and milkshakes, continuing their earlier banter. Sandra realized how comfortable she felt around Keanu. There was no pressure to impress him or pretend to be someone she wasn't. He accepted her exactly as she was, flaws and all. It was a rare gift, one she didn't take lightly. After lunch, they headed to the final property on their list. Nestled at the edge of a forest, the house blended seamlessly with its surroundings. Large glass doors opened onto a wraparound deck, offering breathtaking views of the trees and distant mountains. Inside, the layout was open and airy, with wooden beams and neutral tones creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. Sandra wandered through the rooms in awe, her heart skipping a beat, as she pictured herself living there. "Well?" Keanu asked, watching her reaction closely. Sandra turned to him, her eyes shining. "This is it," she said softly. "This is the one." Keanu smiled, clearly happy for her. "It suits you," he said. "Feels peaceful, like you." Sandra nodded, overwhelmed by the realization that she might have finally found her home. As they finished touring the house, Sandra felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Not just for finding the perfect place, but for the unexpected friendship that had blossomed along the way. House hunting had started as a stressful task, but thanks to Keanu, it had become an adventure filled with laughter, honesty, and meaningful connections. For Sandra, it was proof that sometimes life gave you exactly what you needed, even if it came wrapped in surprises. Sandra couldn't believe how quickly things had changed. Just a few weeks ago, she was dreading house hunting, feeling frustrated and disrespected by Lisa's comments. Now, standing in the middle of this beautiful home surrounded by nature, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The house wasn't perfect, it needed some updates, and the backyard was overgrown. But it had potential. More importantly, it felt like hers. She could already picture herself sitting on the deck with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise filter through the trees. Keanu stood nearby, leaning against one of the wooden beams that framed the living room. He watched Sandra as she moved from room to room, her face lighting up with excitement. "You're sure about this?" he asked gently. Sandra nodded without hesitation. "Yes," she said firmly. "I've never been more certain about anything." Keanu smiled, his expression warm. "Good. You deserve a place that makes you happy." The real estate agent for this property, a kind older woman named Diane, joined them shortly after. Unlike Lisa, Diane was patient and respectful, answering all of Sandra's questions thoroughly. She explained the history of the house, pointing out its unique features and suggesting ideas for renovations. Sandra appreciated her honesty and professionalism. When Diane mentioned that another buyer had shown interest but hadn't made an offer yet, Sandra didn't hesitate. She decided to move forward, knowing deep down that this was where she belonged. As they finalized the details, Sandra glanced at Keanu, who gave her an encouraging nod. His quiet support meant the world to her. House hunting was stressful enough on its own, but having someone like Keanu by her side made the process feel manageable and even enjoyable. By the time they left the house, Sandra felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. For the first time in ages, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't constantly rushing from one project to the next, always searching for something better. This house could be her anchor, a place where she could truly rest. On the drive back, Sandra turned to Keanu, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply. "I don't think I would have found this place without you." Keanu shrugged modestly. "You did the hard part," he replied. "All I did was tag along and eat burgers." Sandra laughed, shaking her head. "Don't sell yourself short. You kept me sane during all those bad tours. And honestly, your advice really helped me figure out what I wanted." Keanu grinned, clearly pleased with himself. "Well, I'm glad I could help. But seriously, this house is amazing. It fits you perfectly. Sandra agreed, her mind already racing with plans for decorating and fixing it up. She imagined painting the walls soft colors, adding cozy furniture, and filling the space with personal touches. Most of all, she pictured inviting friends and family over, sharing meals in the dining room and hosting movie nights in the living room. It wasn't just a house. It was a home. Over the next few days, Sandra threw herself into preparing for the purchase. She met with her financial advisor, reviewed contracts, and coordinated with contractors to plan the renovations. Despite the whirlwind of activity, she made sure to keep Keanu updated, sending him photos of design ideas and asking for his opinion. To her delight, he responded enthusiastically, offering suggestions and cheering her on. Their conversations became a bright spot in her busy schedule, reminding her to pause and appreciate the journey. One afternoon, while discussing paint colors for the kitchen, Keanu sent her a message that caught her off guard. "Hey, I might have found something." "Interesting," he wrote. "Want to check it out tomorrow?" Sandra raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Something interesting, like what?" she replied. Keanu kept his response vague. "Just trust me. It's worth seeing." The next morning, Sandra met Keanu at a small cafe near the outskirts of town. He greeted her with his usual warm smile, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Ready for a surprise?" he asked, handing her one of the cups. Sandra took a sip, savoring the rich flavor. "Depends on what kind of surprise we're talking about," she teased. Keanu chuckled. "No spoilers. Let's go." They drove for about 20 minutes, winding through scenic roads until they arrived at a secluded property nestled in the hills. As they stepped out of the car, Sandra gasped. The house before her was breathtaking, a blend of rustic charm and modern elegance. Stone pathways led to a sprawling front porch adorned with flower boxes, while large windows framed stunning views of the valley below. It looked like something out of a magazine. "This is incredible," Sandra murmured, her eyes wide with wonder. Keanu grinned. "I thought you'd like it. Turns out it's for sale too." Sandra turned to him, stunned. "Wait, are you serious? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Keanu shrugged playfully. "Where's the fun in that? Besides, I wanted to see your reaction." They spent the next hour exploring the house, marveling at its unique features. There was a library with built-in shelves, a chef's kitchen with state-of-the-art appliances, and a master suite with a private balcony overlooking the landscape. Every detail seemed designed to inspire creativity and relaxation. Sandra loved it, but she also knew it wasn't quite right for her. "It's beautiful," she admitted, "but it doesn't feel like me. My place, the one we saw yesterday, is closer to what I need." Keanu nodded, understanding completely. "Yeah, I figured that too. Still, I thought it was worth checking out. Who knows? Maybe it'll speak to someone else." Sandra smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. Even though the house wasn't for her, she appreciated the effort he'd put into finding it. It was another reminder of how much she valued their friendship. As they drove away, Sandra reflected on everything that had happened. Finding her dream house was a huge milestone, but the journey had given her something even more valuable: a deeper connection with Keanu. In an industry often defined by superficial relationships, she cherished the authenticity they shared. They talked openly, supported each other, and laughed together, qualities that were rare and precious. By the end of the week, Sandra officially closed on her new home. The paperwork was signed, the keys were hers, and the contractors were scheduled to start work within days. She celebrated with a quiet dinner at her favorite restaurant, inviting Keanu to join her. Over plates of pasta and glasses of wine, they toasted to new beginnings and unexpected friendships. "Here's to finding what we need," Sandra said, raising her glass. Keanu clinked his against hers, his smile sincere. "And to trusting ourselves to know when we've found it." As the evening wore on, Sandra realized how much her perspective had shifted since the day she met Keanu. Lisa's insults no longer bothered her because she understood that people's opinions didn't define her worth. What mattered was staying. true to herself and surrounding herself with those who valued her for who she was. Thanks to Keanu, she had rediscovered her confidence and learned to embrace life's surprises with grace and humor. When the night ended, Sandra hugged Keanu goodbye, feeling grateful for everything he had done. "I owe you big time," she said softly. Keanu shook his head, his expression earnest. "You don't owe me anything. Just promise me one thing." Sandra tilted her head, curious. "What's that?" Keanu smiled. "Promise me you'll invite me over once the renovations are done. I want to see how you transform the place." Sandra laughed, nodding eagerly. "Deal. And maybe I'll even cook you dinner." Driving home that night, Sandra felt a sense of contentment she hadn't known in years. Life was unpredictable, full of ups and downs, but moments like these reminded her of its beauty. She had found not only a home but also a friend who reminded her of the importance of kindness, authenticity, and trust. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them, with her new house as her sanctuary and Keanu as her ally. The weeks that followed Sandra's purchase of the house were a whirlwind of activity. Contractors arrived early each morning, their tools clanging against the quiet backdrop of the forest. Painters worked tirelessly to refresh the walls, while carpenters repaired creaky floorboards and added new shelving to the library. Sandra visited the property daily, overseeing the progress and ensuring everything aligned with her vision. It was exhausting but exhilarating, like watching a dream slowly come to life. Keanu stayed involved too, checking in regularly via text or phone calls. He offered suggestions when asked, like recommending a specific shade of green for the kitchen cabinets, but mostly he listened as Sandra shared updates. His encouragement kept her motivated during moments of doubt, like when the plumbing system needed an unexpected overhaul or when one of the contractors accidentally damaged a wall. "It's all part of the process," Keanu reminded her. "Every hiccup just makes the end result sweeter." Sandra appreciated his optimism. She had always been a perfectionist, someone who wanted things done quickly and flawlessly. But renovating a house taught her patience. Progress was slow and mistakes happened, but each step brought her closer to creating a space that truly felt like hers. The more time she spent at the house, the more she fell in love with it. Even in its unfinished state, it radiated warmth and possibility. One sunny afternoon, Sandra decided to take a break from supervising the workers. She sat on the deck sipping iced tea and admiring the view. The forest stretched endlessly before her, its lush greenery alive with the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. For the first time in years, she felt grounded. This place wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary, a retreat from the chaos of her career and the pressures of fame. Here she could simply be Sandra, without any expectations or pretenses. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was Keanu. "How's it going?" he asked when she answered. Sandra smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Good," she replied. "I'm sitting outside, taking a breather. It's so peaceful here." Keanu chuckled. "Sounds nice. Wish I could join you." Sandra hesitated for a moment, then said impulsively, "Why don't you? Come over this weekend. You can see how much we've gotten done, and maybe give me some ideas for the backyard." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by Keanu's amused tone. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude." Sandra rolled her eyes, though he couldn't see her. "You're not intruding. You've been helping me through this whole thing. Besides, I need another opinion on the fire pit area. I trust your judgment." Keanu laughed softly. All right. I'll bring snacks." "Deal?" "Deal," Sandra agreed, smiling as she hung up. She hadn't realized how much she missed spending time with him until now. Their conversations had become a constant source of comfort, and having him visit felt like the perfect way to celebrate the progress she'd made. When Saturday rolled around, Keanu arrived right on time, carrying a bag of groceries and a six-pack of craft beer. "Figured we might as well eat while we work," he said, setting the items on the kitchen counter. Sandra laughed, gesturing toward the living room. We're still working on the furniture, so prepare to sit on cardboard boxes. But hey, at least there's a roof over our heads." They spent the afternoon exploring the renovated spaces, discussing future plans and debating the best layout for the backyard. Sandra showed Keanu sketches she'd drawn of her ideas. A vegetable garden, near the fence, a hammock strung between two trees, and a stone pathway leading to a small meditation corner. Keanu listened intently, nodding along and occasionally chiming in with suggestions. "What about a little pond?" he proposed. "Something simple with lilies and maybe a fountain. It'd fit the vibe out here." Sandra loved the idea and immediately started jotting notes. As they talked, she noticed how natural it felt to collaborate with him. They bounced ideas off each other effortlessly, their combined creativity sparking new possibilities. By the time evening fell, they had mapped out a plan for the entire outdoor space. Complete with a rough budget and timeline, exhausted but satisfied, they collapsed onto the deck chairs, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. "This is amazing," Sandra said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "I never thought I'd enjoy planning something like this so much, and honestly, I couldn't have done it without you." Keanu glanced at her, his expression soft. "You're selling yourself short. You've got great instincts. I just helped point them in the right direction." Sandra shook her head, her voice firm. "No, you did more than that. You reminded me to trust myself, to believe that I deserve something beautiful." Keanu didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared out at the forest, his gaze thoughtful. After a moment, he said, "You know, people spend so much energy trying to prove themselves to others. But at the end of the day, it's about proving it to yourself. That's what you're doing here. Building a home isn't just about four walls. It's about creating a space where you feel safe, happy, and whole." Sandra absorbed his words, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She had always known Keanu was wise, but hearing him articulate something she'd struggled to put into words herself touched her deeply. For years, she had chased success, validation, and approval, often losing sight of what truly mattered. Now, standing on the brink of a new chapter, she finally understood the importance of building a foundation, not just for her career, but for her soul. As night fell, they lit a small bonfire in the backyard, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories under the stars. Sandra told Keanu about her childhood dreams of becoming an actress, the challenges she faced early in her career, and the sacrifices she made to get where she was today. In return, Keanu opened up about his own struggles, the loss of loved ones, the pressure of fame, and the loneliness that sometimes came with it. Their conversation was raw and honest, yet filled with laughter and lightness. It was the kind of connection Sandra hadn't experienced in years, a bond built on mutual respect and vulnerability. By the time Keanu left late that night, Sandra felt lighter, as if she had shed a layer of weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. She walked him to his car, hugging him tightly before he drove away. "Thanks for everything," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Keanu smiled, squeezing her shoulder. "Anytime. And remember, you're doing great. Keep going." Over the next few weeks, Sandra poured her energy into finishing the renovations. With Keanu's encouragement still fresh in her mind, she tackled every challenge head-on, refusing to let setbacks discourage her. Slowly but surely, the house transformed into the cozy, inviting space she had envisioned. Walls were painted in soothing colors, hardwood floors gleamed beneath the sunlight, and shelves were stocked with books and photos. Outside, the backyard began to take shape, with flower beds blooming and the stone pathway winding through the grass. Finally, after months of hard work, the house was ready. Sandra stood in the center of the living room, taking it all in. Every detail reflected her personality, from the mismatched throw pillows on the couch to the hand-painted tiles in the kitchen backsplash. It was imperfect in the best possible way, a reflection of who she was rather than who she thought she should be. She invited Keanu over for dinner to celebrate. Together, they cooked a simple meal of pasta and salad, dining at the newly finished dining table. Afterward, they sat by the fire pit, wrapped in blankets as they admired the twinkling light strung across the trees. "This is exactly what I imagined," Sandra said, her voice filled with pride. "It's perfect." Keanu nodded, his smile warm. "It suits you. Feels like you." Sandra looked at him, gratitude swelling in her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "Not just the house, but everything. You reminded me of who I am and what really matters." Keanu shrugged modestly, his eyes shining in the firelight. "You already knew all that. I just gave you a nudge." Sandra laughed, shaking her head. "Well, I'm glad you did. Thank you for everything." As the night wore on, Sandra felt a profound sense of peace. Life would always have its ups and downs, its challenges and uncertainties. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. She had her house, her sanctuary, and most importantly, she had friendships like the one she shared with Keanu. Relationships rooted in kindness, authenticity, and trust. Whatever the future held, she knew she wouldn't be facing it alone. Months passed, and Sandra's new home became more than just a house. It became the heart of her life. She spent weekends tending to the garden, planting flowers that would bloom in spring and vegetables she hoped to harvest by summer. The backyard, pond Keanu had suggested, was completed, its gentle fountain creating a soothing soundtrack as she read books on the deck. Inside, every corner of the house told a story. Framed photos of her rescue dogs lined the walls. Colorful rugs added warmth to the wooden floors, and shelves overflowed with novels and mementos from her travels. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was hers. Keanu visited often, sometimes bringing snacks or a bottle of wine, other times just showing up unannounced with his motorcycle helmet still on. Their friendship deepened with each visit, built on shared laughter and quiet moments. They cooked meals together, worked on small projects around the house, and sat by the fire pit late into the night, talking about everything and nothing. Sandra found herself looking forward to these visits more than anything else. In an industry where relationships often felt fleeting, Keanu's presence was steady and grounding. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled in the wind, Sandra decided to throw a small gathering at her house. She invited a few close friends, including Keanu, along with some neighbors she'd grown fond of during her time in the community. It wasn't a grand event, just good food, warm company, and music playing softly in the background. But it marked a milestone for Sandra. For so long she had lived a solitary lifestyle, moving from one project to the next without putting down roots. Now, surrounded by people who cared about her, she realized how much richer her life had become. As guests mingled in the living room and spilled out onto the deck, Sandra stood back, watching the scene unfold. Her dog curled up at her feet, while the smell of roasted vegetables wafted through the air. Keanu approached her, holding 2 glasses of red wine. "Here," he said, handing her one. "You look like you could use this." Sandra took the glass gratefully, clinking it against his. "Thanks. This means a lot to me." Keanu glanced around the room, his expression thoughtful. "It feels right, doesn't it? All of this?" Sandra followed his gaze, taking in the cozy chaos of her home. Friends laughed over plates of food, someone played guitar in the corner, and the glow of string lights illuminated smiling faces. "Yeah," she said softly. "It does." Later that night, after most of the guests had left, Sandra and Keanu lingered by the fire pit. The air was cool, and the stars shimmered brightly above them. They talked about their lives, the highs and lows, the lessons learned along the way. Sandra confessed that she used to feel guilty for wanting stability, as if slowing down somehow made her less ambitious. But now, sitting in the home she had created, she understood that ambition wasn't just about chasing success. It was also about building a life worth living. Keanu nodded, his voice quiet but firm. "We spend so much time trying to prove ourselves to the world. But what matters most is proving it to ourselves. Finding peace. That's the hardest part." Sandra looked at him, struck by how well he understood her. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" she asked, half teasing. Keanu chuckled. I don't, I just listen. Their conversation drifted to lighter topics, and soon they were laughing about old memories, awkward auditions, ridiculous on-set mishaps, and the absurdity of Hollywood parties. As the fire crackled between them, Sandra felt a deep sense of contentment. Life wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. What mattered was the connection she nurtured and the joy she found in the little things. The next morning, Sandra woke early, stepping outside to breathe in the fresh air. Dew glistened on the grass and birds chirped cheerfully in the trees. She walked barefoot across the yard, feeling the cool earth beneath her toes. This was her sanctuary, a place where she could recharge, reflect, and dream. She thought about all the twists and turns that had led her here. The stressful house hunt, Lisa's cutting remarks, and Keanu's unexpected arrival. Each moment, no matter how challenging, had shaped her journey. Back inside, she brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a notebook filled with ideas for future projects. Writing had always been a passion of hers, though she rarely had time to pursue it. Now, with a stable home and a renewed sense of purpose, she felt inspired to try again. Maybe she'd write a screenplay based on her experiences, capturing the humor and humanity of life in Hollywood. Or perhaps she'd pen something entirely different, a story about kindness, resilience, and finding beauty in imperfection. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Keanu. "Morning. Hope you're enjoying your quiet day. Let me know if you need help with anything or anyone." Sandra smiled, typing a quick reply. "Thanks. Just sipping coffee and dreaming big. You'll be the first to know if I need backup." As the day unfolded, Sandra reflected on how far she'd come. House hunting had started as a daunting task, but it had turned into something transformative. She had found not only a home, but also a deeper understanding of herself, and a friendship she cherished more than words could express. Keanu had shown her the power of kindness, reminding her that even the smallest gestures could make a difference. Whether it was standing up to Lisa's judgment or supporting her through renovations, his presence had been a gift she would never forget. By evening, Sandra settled into her favorite chair by the window, a blanket draped over her legs and a book in hand. Outside, the forest grew dark, its shadows blending seamlessly with the night. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the house but for the journey that had brought her here. Life was unpredictable, full of surprises both good and bad. But amidst the chaos, there were moments of clarity, connection, and grace. Sandra closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the forest lull her into calmness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new adventures. But tonight, she allowed herself to simply exist, to revel in the peace she had worked so hard to create. And as she drifted off to sleep, one thought lingered in her mind. Home wasn't just a place, it was a feeling. And for the first time in years, she finally felt at home.